Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to edTrends. I'd like to thank our partnership and our collaboration with Cognia and the UF Lastinger Center for Learning and Atlas. This session would not be possible without the collaboration of these three groups. Today's topic is effective K-12 online learning experiences, advice from pioneer and innovators. I'm sending greetings from the School of Education from the University at Albany. Unfortunately, Dr. Jason Lane is unable to join us. He had a president's meeting he needed to attend, so he is unable to be with us this afternoon. I am going to turn this section of the presentation over to the moderator, Dr. Cavanaugh, Chief Experience Officer, the UF Lastinger Center for Learning, who also was one of the key collaborators in today's presentation. Kathy?
Great, thanks so much, Jerry. I am thrilled to be in the Zoom room with some of my heroes from the online learning world. We have a group of leaders and legends, innovators and pioneers, and I'm excited to be able to talk with them and hear from them today. I feel like I will have a fairly easy job because I think they will have more than enough to share. So I will work on keeping conversations going and making sure that you hear from everyone. So let me introduce Dr. Allison Powell, who leads the Digital Learning Collaborative, and she'll be able to explain what that group does. And I know she has resources to share with you related to the work that she's doing. She's been in online learning, I think as all of us have from the beginning in the 90s. So lots to share, and each of these folks is still very active and innovative today. We also have Mickey Revenaugh, who's at Pearson Global Schools, and Julie Young, one of the leaders at Arizona State, who is the leader of Arizona Prep Digital. So excited. Let's go to the slide that has some of our first questions. And what all of us know, probably the audience as well, is aware that connectedness is more important now than ever, and more important in a digital space, sometimes than in a face-to-face space, but especially in school. You know, we know that's one of the factors that keeps students engaged and gets them toward completion. But we're in a time of trauma, so I wanted to hear from each of our panelists about what they're seeing, what they've learned, about approaches for helping educators in particular feel that they're supported, to feel that they're part of a nurturing community as they work with students who are going through so much. So I'm going to let the first person who wants to share go right ahead.
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in just because I kind of come to this from working on at a network of online schools, of virtual schools. I'm one of the co-founders of Connections Academy, which got started back in 2001. This all makes us feel really old, except for Allison, who I think started when she was 5. So, but otherwise, we've been at this for a long time. And the idea of the Connections Academy network of schools is really to address both for teachers and for families this desire to be connected in a way that goes beyond their zip code and their physical community. And so one of the real beauties of being involved in a network of online schools that's then part of a larger community of online learning, that's then part of an industry that now spans the globe, is that you have a lot of company. And so the teachers that come into our schools and the educators that lead our schools very rarely have done anything like this before in their lives. Once they come in, they find that they have built-in mentors, supporters, professional learning communities, both formal and informal, and the opportunity to engage in a really intimate way with the students and families that they work with. And so I think being intentional about building that in from the beginning and then seeking out your people, your tribe, you'll find that there are lots and lots of folks out there that are doing exactly this.
I'll jump in. I'm Julie Young, and I started my digital career at Florida Virtual School. And what was most interesting about that whole experience is that from day one, we worked super hard to develop this community this culture of community where everyone was ridiculously connected and had the opportunity to get to know each other better than they probably got to know each other in a school building where they were locked off into each of their rooms and only allowed out for a little bit of lunch and an occasional bathroom break, and then certainly after school. And so really kind of putting that first and foremost as we think about these types of situations. Number one, our teachers, our parents, our students are all, as Kathy said, dealing with this crazy trauma of a pandemic, of which has never occurred in our lifetime, did occur in my 9-year-old father's lifetime. And so you have such a, that whole other layer of complexity when you're thinking about distance learning or virtual learning and all that goes with that. And so what we've really focused on at ASU Prep Digital is focused on really applying that high-tech, high-touch model that we talk about so often for kids to our teachers and to our staff, and ensuring that it's not just business as usual, and we aren't just coming together when we need to talk about business, but that we do set up those Slack channels, and some of those are set up for fun, some of those are set up for specific work purposes, that we do have staff meetings, and those staff meetings have fun activities that are built into them, that we do have extracurricular activities that both parents, students, and staff participate. We just did a talent show with our middle school students, and it was, or actually our K-5 students, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So all those kinds of things that you think about doing in a regular environment or a traditional environment or a face-to-face environment, pick your topic there, pick your term. How do you bring those into this environment and kind of create a sense of levity and a sense of community where people still feel very connected and very cared about?
Yeah, and I don't have a ton more to add. I think they covered a lot, but I started my career in this area with the Clark County School District in Las Vegas and their online program. And like the other programs, we really wanted to build that sense of community. And I think Mickey acknowledged kind of the mentor teacher or having a buddy. I think we have lots of opportunities to have those staff meetings in larger groups, but there's always those one or two people that aren't always connected and don't always feel comfortable in the larger group. So having kind of a buddy or somebody that can check in on them and it's more one-on-one relationship, I think is also helpful for somebody that might not join a fun luncheon or a talent show. I think is also really important, just so they feel valued as well and have somebody to help manage their stress, just like we're having them model for the students.
If I can throw in one more thing, because what Allison said made me think of this, really thinking that the phone is your friend, and all the different ways that you can communicate. I mean, one of the things that's so beautiful about a virtual environment that's done well is the ability to connect one-on-one without distractions, and to have the privacy for those conversations and really get to know each other as educators and colleagues, but your students and your parents and those families become your friends. And so if you kind of approach it that way, that I have this amazing opportunity to connect with all of these individuals personally and one-on-one, then you have an opportunity to teach like you've never taught before. Definitely.
And just something to add to, we've done a lot of PD over the last summer and fall. And the one thing that most of the teachers are coming from traditional districts and just want time to talk and share. And sometimes it's just venting and not related to school, but giving them that time where they're away from their students and can just talk in a safe place, I think is really important. That's the number one thing we've heard from teachers.
Setting up rooms, setting up the Zoom, we call them the Zoom rooms, for all the different reasons that we've discussed, where people can just jump in and other people are there and they can ask a question, or they can tell them about an experience they just had, or they can cry, or whatever it is they need to do at the moment. But there's always somewhere to go.
Well, the one thing I would just add, and I'm sure Kathy's eager to move us on to the next question, but one of the things that's been so interesting to me about virtual schools that we've been working with, and then how they have played in this crazy pandemic year that we've had, is that these schools were always refuges for people for students in particular, who were escaping from lots of different kinds of trauma. I mean, the bullying thing went from being about 10% of our students being impacted by that when they came in, before they came in, to probably close to half of the kids saying that they were coming to escape some kind of bullying. But then there's kids who are going through medical treatment, who have various mental health issues that they're grappling with, for whom this environment is really well set up. And for them, it was always online school being the place that they could structure the environment and have the circumstances such so that they had a respite from the things that they felt were traumatic in their lives. And now they have lots of company, right? Because all of us are going through the same kind of trauma. And the ability to have that environment that's really supportive of you, even if you're an introvert, even if you're the one with social anxiety and you really don't want to have your camera on, even if you're the kid that's always the last to speak up in a classroom, or the teacher who always felt a little bit awkward in a traditional environment, online creates space for everybody in a way that's very egalitarian, I think, and really allows each person to be their best self if you're intentional and structured about it. And so it's almost as if the whole world has discovered the secret that we had about what a great online school could be for kids and families and teachers who really needed it. And now, hopefully, everybody's taken advantage of that in this particular era.
Thanks for bringing up that history of virtual schooling. It is important to recognize that there is that heritage and that expertise. And because it's new for so many, Allison, I'm glad that you mentioned PD. As we sort of differentiate and think about spaces where people feel comfortable, there are some new skills that are involved. And Julie, you mentioned intentionality and making sure that people understand kind of where they can spend time and where they can find comfort and community. What are the skills that you think, or the capabilities that you think folks who are new to online teaching have begun to build, and that leaders should be thinking about?
I think one of the things we all know is that our workforce, our teachers, were not prepared for this type of learning environment, and so that is not new information for those of us who have been in this business for a very long time, because like many companies who complain that their graduates come to them and they have to completely retrain them, or they have a whole training program. Well, in this space, we have all been in that particular situation where we have an entire training program to teach teachers how to teach online. So I think that is a silver lining that is from this crisis, that has come out of this crisis, is that our teacher education programs have realized that this is a gap, and they are working very hard to fill that gap and recognize that they need to provide that training to our teachers. But the other thing that's really unique and different, and I'll be interested in the other ladies' comments, but if we think about how we tend to, especially at the secondary level, our traditional models where we go into our classroom, we close our door, we hate that old adage, sage on the stage, but it's true. And we typically keep kids together. They're working on the same things at the same time, turning things in on the same day. And in a strong virtual program, it's exactly the opposite. All of that is completely flipped. And the beauty of it is the fact that students can work at their own pace and they can move forward, and that you can meet them where they are and take them where they need to be. And so that is a really different thing. It's very scary for teachers who have never done it before. It's somewhat overwhelming. So really understanding how to step back and think about each and every student as an individual learner, and what does that mean, and what kind of what kind of gift can that be? So you got to identify the tools that will be your friend, that enable you to work with kids on an individual basis. Zoom can be misused, and it can be your best friend. And so I think just first and foremost, when we worked with our teachers in our brick and mortar schools at ASU Prep, prior to rolling this out broadly, it was really about helping them overcome the fear of the tools first. And then once they got a little bit of comfort with the tools, then we dove into the pedagogical solutions and the instructional practices. And I'm going to stop there and pass the torch.
One of the things that we've seen that I've seen that's been a little bit heartbreaking, but I see some hope in it anyway, is that because of this instant, like you're in your regular classroom today and tomorrow suddenly you're teaching remote, is that all the progress that teachers had made over the past several decades to not be the sage on the stage kind of got thrown out the window a little bit when all of a sudden you were responsible not just for instruction, but also delivery of content. So most schools weren't quite ready with lots of good digital materials that kids could interact with directly. There was really no asynchronous anything, no self-study anything. It was all in the teacher. And so all of a sudden you were back to being, the person who's doing instruction and also delivering all the content and managing the time and doing everything, which is the opposite of where most brick and mortar schools had been going over the past couple of decades, and really different from what a great online teacher should be able to do with their time. I think that's started to ease up a little bit as teachers have gotten a little bit more comfortable, as schools have become a little bit smarter about making sure that there's really good content materials that kids can access directly, engage with, learn through, and then use that precious teacher time and time with peers together synchronously to do discussion and projects and deeper work, as opposed to assuming that it's all like sitting and watching and listening.
Yeah, definitely. I think what we saw was just, let's take everything that we were doing in the traditional classroom and put it online. And Zoom was the easiest way to do that. And so it is good to see that schools are starting to think ahead and for next year, and maybe they'll implement learning management systems and content. So you as the teacher aren't designing online classes while you're teaching them, because that's like, we learned that a long time ago, that's a whole different set of skills to do that. And there's a lot of great resources out there already. So you as the classroom teacher shouldn't have to be designing that. And so we've seen a lot. I think the nice thing about this is what Julie was talking about, where it can be more individualized and personalized, is that you have a lot of data now right at their hands that's coming quickly. And how do you take that data to really work with the students individually and help them get through all of that, where their individual educational path. And just as a resource, I don't know if we should be talking about this, but there's been a lot of research done over the last 20 plus years in this area. And we have developed sets of standards for how to teach in an online classroom and what those skills are. It can be overwhelming if you go, and I think we're going to share the links to those standards, but it's kind of a build your own adventure path. Like, we're not expecting you to know how to do every single one of those things when you start your own online classroom, but kind of find one or two areas where you can grow and build on, really get good at those skills, and then keep adding more as you go. But there are lots of resources out there, and a lot of research has been done from both the researchers and practitioners to develop those, and what skills you'll need to be successful in teaching in these new environments.
The other thing that was been really interesting, that I think was very eye-opening to educators coming from a traditional environment and suddenly being remote in kids' homes, is that, guess what? All of a sudden, your kids' families are part of the picture in a way that you probably may have wished for, or maybe not, but there's no escaping it now. So their parents, their siblings, their pets, their construction going on next door, all that stuff is suddenly there in front of you. And so you get to know your students in a way that's so much more intimate than you would have otherwise, because you see them in their own environment, what they choose to put on their wall of their room, how they decorate their desk, all that stuff is visible to you. And the skills that you need as a teacher, as an educator, to work really productively and effectively with your kids' parents, I think is a skill set that may have gotten shortchanged a little bit in the early emergency, but people are recognizing more and more that parents have a really important role to play in their kids' education, full stop. When the education is actually happening in the kids' home, they have an even more important role to play. And how you structure that, how you don't make them the teacher, but really collaborate with them as partners is a sort of the secret sauce of virtual schools over these past couple of decades, and something that I think will be a lasting benefit of the period that we're going through now.
I totally agree with that. I think we've always said that we make parents our partners, and we invite them into the virtual space in a way that is very, fundamentally different once you get to middle school and high school in most school districts. And yet we know that we can't do our best job and be our best selves for those children without the parents, regardless of whether the child is 5 or the child is 15, they're still a child. And so I think that's absolutely critical. I think the other thing too is when, there's a fine line. And so I want to make sure I say this the way I intend it, because Allison talked about, we just, we took everything that we were doing in the classroom, and because we didn't know how to do anything differently, we just kind of said, okay, how do we transform this into a Zoom room, from 8 in the morning until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And yet, if we think about what we do in a great blended classroom, whether that's, a kindergarten classroom who does it naturally, or a 10th grade English class, we do work with kids in small groups. Kids do projects together. We do have opportunities for one-on-one. We do have opportunities for field trips and those kinds of things. So you take virtual field trips, you take them together, you do circle time in your elementary classrooms, and you facilitate what that looks like in a Zoom environment. You do have the opportunity for centers when you use your breakout rooms appropriately. And there's all kinds of, virtual tools that allow you to simulate the best practices from our traditional classrooms that then transfer into that virtual world. And then I think, goes back to, we just can't have our teachers spending 15 hours a week creating content. And there's no reason for it in the year 2021. There is good content out there that has been tested, tried and true. And most of our states have a state virtual school of which you can tap into that content. And so we do have to think about not only what's best for our students in regards to them not being tied to Zoom all day, but let's think about our teachers. They have to be tied all day and then create. So I think the pedagogical practices go deeper just in learning how to choose the right materials and know when you have to create versus when you have to procure, and how you go about doing that.
Those professional learning communities or communities of practice must play such a strong role in that curation and development and adaptation of content. I appreciate your insights around the kind of emerging and evolving roles of teachers. And in so doing, you addressed a question that Angela brought about the roles of teachers in partnership with parents. So thank you for that. There's another question that was added about diversity and inclusion. So I think it fits into the discussion around pedagogy and content. Some schools have dropped their diversity and inclusion classes because of just being in different spaces. So the question asker is asking for your thoughts about the need, or what what you think about dropping those classes or dropping that content, or what could the role of the individual teacher be in that context?
Well, I noted that the question also raised a concern about online classes as not having the kind of same safe spaces as you might be able to engineer or set up in a face-to-face environment. And I would argue that actually you have the opportunity online to have better safe spaces. You have the opportunity for students to gather, with peers sharing the same concerns or those not, and being able to share really frankly in an online environment. And it is through use of breakout rooms and things like that. So yeah, if you have all 35 of your ninth grade English kids together in a Zoom room, it's going to be hard to have the same kinds of smart, intimate discussions that you could have in your face-to-face classroom, but you wouldn't have had those all together in one big shouting match anyway. You would have broken into small groups. You would have had kids, sit on the comfortable pillows in the corner and have a really frank discussion. You would have had after school time for kids to zero in on things that really matter to them. You can do absolutely all of that online, and in fact do it in a way that potentially students might feel more comfortable sharing some things than they would in a face-to-face environment. So I don't think that's a good excuse on the part of the partner schools that are saying that they should be dropping those things. There's more need for that than ever, and more opportunity to do it really well.
Totally agree. I think we've done clubs as well around DEI, and with different focuses for our students to come together and have tough discussions and just share their feelings and what have you. And we've done the same for our teachers. So for example, with the drama on at the Capitol that we all saw so frequently on TV recently, there were people that were very distressed. And so we opened up Zoom rooms and said, come on in and let's just all talk about it together. And so again, that's a safe space that people can opt in or opt out. And I agree with Mickey. I think too, it also takes away the peer pressure of if a student's in a classroom and they want to talk privately to a teacher, it's very difficult for them to make that happen without everybody knowing, that that's what they're trying to do and wondering what's wrong. And so you oftentimes find out about students who are thinking about hurting themselves or are having serious issues at home or bullying and those kinds of things in an online environment. If indeed your teachers are creating those personal relationships, making those phone calls or having those video calls where they're truly getting to know the students as people first.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Julie and Mickey said. And I've kind of heard the opposite, that like more and more schools are having these conversations and creating these places, and teachers have done a good job of building those relationships with the students and checking in on them first. I know there are places, I just saw that article on the Clark County School District where they've had the record numbers of suicides. And so it is like really, it's checking on their mental health first, I think, is most important above the academics. And this environment does provide that safe place, where more so than I think in the face-to-face.
Any other comments or advice around pedagogy or approaching design before we continue? All right, let's move to the next slide then. I think this is our resource references. So what, in addition to what you've mentioned, what else are teachers finding valuable or leaders finding valuable as we think about the new world ahead of us?
One area that we found teachers wanted quite a bit of help with, and school leaders as well. There's, in addition to thinking you can't do diversity and inclusion in an online environment, there's a lot of anxiety around doing special education in an online environment. And again, this is one of these places where from the very beginning, we found that we could actually do some things even better than we could do in a face-to-face environment through online. So, kids on the autism spectrum, kids with social and school anxiety, students with ADD and other processing difficulties, the ability to have flexibility of time and space just by itself would allow, the learning experiences to be structured to meet their needs. And then, the schools that I work with are across the US are virtual public schools. And so they have the same requirement to provide a free and appropriate public education to students as any other public school. And so it's, modifying the IEP, looking for any face-to-face therapeutic resources that are necessary within the student's community, and otherwise managing that student's provision through really careful calibration of the online environment. So I think especially educators that are interested in students with learning differences, there are places to gather together to look at best practices for special education and online learning, and then lots of experience on the part of organizations like all the ones represented here. And how do you do that really well? And find that you're actually an incredible resource for parents who have been, their foreheads are bloodied from banging their head against a brick wall of not getting what their kids need in a traditional school environment. So SPED, I would say for sure, both a community and an area of practice that's showing a lot of promise.
I'll just add, if you look at a typical IEP, most of the accommodations that are there are things we do every day naturally in a strong virtual environment. It's not out of the norm. It's just what we do, and so it's kind of amazing that depending on what that learning difference is, it can just be the most amazing experience for a child that they've ever had.
Yes, the tools are available. As Mickey said, the flexibility is available, and there are new opportunities for service providers to work with families and students.
Another thing I'll put in a plug for it is just about this generation of kids that we're serving. So let's face it, these kids were born into a sea of digital opportunity, right? And the place that we usually take that away from them is school. So the things that have been really exciting to see happening in our online learning environments is things like esports. Right. These are students who gaming is one of the things that they do for fun. They can do it competitively. Bringing esports leagues into our online school environments has been something that's been really cool and exciting. And we've been able to kind of follow the lead of the kids and the things that they're interested in to structure what a school environment would be like if they designed it from scratch. So from the very serious special education needs all the way to what do kids do for fun, and how do we facilitate that in a way that's really constructive, and may also spark some ideas about like what they want to do for careers, and give them some of those practical skills. So Rocket League, we launched that this year in our online schools and have kids competing. We think that they're going to win millions of dollars of prize money and scholarships to their higher education experience as a result.
Yeah, just to add on that, I facilitated a webinar a couple of weeks ago with a bunch of students that are new to this and didn't choose this environment. And 100% overall agreement was what Mickey just said, is that they're lacking the social piece. Like everything school is all about the academics. And just one girl started a debate club at her school in her district, and they're doing internships in the esports, but giving them opportunities to socialize. It doesn't just have to be about the academics, but that was overall by far the biggest issue right now that they're seeing, is that they're just not getting that social time with their, even if it's just talking to a teacher. They said even an adult fun time would be fun. So.
Right, we were talking in the beginning about differentiation and making sure that staff had those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We actually do online recess with our students, and You can do anything you want in that environment. They go from playing hangman and tic-tac-toe to Pictionary to relay races, and just all kinds of. It's been so fun to see how creative the teachers have become, and the students too, because the students, to Alice's point, they're like, can I start this club? Can I start this club? We have over 20 clubs, I think, within the organization, within the school, and the kids, they've driven which ones have been created and supported and so forth.
So as we think about all of these specific advice and practices and opportunities that you've described in the past several minutes, there's a question in the Q&A that asks us to look forward. So we're incorporating digital and remote learning into regular classrooms post-COVID, most likely. How should this be designed, and how should we be varying the workload that's online, as well as those who have sudden stay-at-home days? So as we think about spending more of our time in a physical place, but with time that we know that we'll be working remotely, what do you think that will look like?
I don't think we'll ever go back. You go ahead, Allison. I'll share my thought in a minute.
Okay, that was kind of where I think we were probably going the same place, but kind of, I would hope that we don't go back to where we were, and that it moves more towards a blended environment where it doesn't have, your kids don't have to be at a school 5 days a week. Maybe they're 2 or 3 days a week, or they could be there 5 days a week. But we're taking advantage of the tools and the technology to really go back to what Julie was saying on really individualizing learning for each and every student. And the technology can help us with that and allow you as the teacher to actually teach, and whether it's small groups or individually, or there could be some full class time. And now we're prepared, I think, if there is another pandemic or a hurricane or a snow day like we're seeing today, like you can continue the learning no matter what. I had done my dissertation back on Singapore when the SARS virus hit back in 2006, and they had to shut down their schools for just like we did, and they weren't prepared, but now they continue practicing a couple of weeks throughout the year where they're continuing, they'll shut down the schools, everybody stays at home, and they continue learning online just to make sure everybody's ready. So when something like this happens again, we're not in the same situation, but the teachers have those skills, the kids are ready, the parents are ready, and we can continue the learning. So I think the school buildings will not go away, but to take advantage of what we've learned and continue this way of teaching and practice.
I think too, we all know that the funding drives the instructional models as opposed to the other way around, which is incredibly frustrating to all of us as educators. And I'm hopeful that this is one of the issues that will be front and center as legislators begin to meet and think about, how do we continue to live with this virus in such a way that we're most productive for our kids? And, why is it that we would want kids to have to, that they have a cold, or they, they're under the weather, or something's going on in their family and they need to be home? Why would we want them to stop learning and have a sick day when it's not necessary anymore? So I think that hopefully will be one of our future forward practices that will be a positive outcome. I think also digital content, I think, will be here to stay. And, it's kind of like we shouldn't be in this situation that how we access our content is place-based. And so regardless of whether that student is in a classroom, in a hospital, at home, or with their aunt in, 300 miles away, they should not have an interruption in their learning. So I think we will build continuity of learning into our programs if we are smart about it, as we look forward to the future as well.
Yeah, and that idea of, it's kind of the holy grail a little bit, right? Is that, really high quality digital content that's available to students anytime, anywhere. making sure that we're not creating new barriers and new divides, right? So that would assume and would require that every student has broadband access at home and a device that will really work. And that's unfortunately it's that last mile issue that when everything else is in place, if that's not in place as well, then we're not really kind of fulfilling the real promise of what online learning or digital learning can be. And then, really being smart about the data that flows from everything that a student might be doing, and not in a creepy Big Brother kind of way, although, there's scenarios that you could think about where it might be like that. But really it's about how do we empower teachers to have their hands on real information, real-time information about what their kids are mastering and what they need help with. And that's really the power of what all this could be, is that then teachers are sort of working to their very highest value, which is the ability to individualize and personalize for students, as opposed to all the other stuff that that teachers sometimes have to do in order to kind of keep their classrooms running in a brick and mortar environment. So I think that we'll see both over the short term and the long term, once this particular emergency is over, some real benefits of a seamlessness around learning that doesn't require you to be in a particular place at a particular time, but it instead is really built around your needs as a learner. That's our soapbox, and we're sticking to it here.
Seamless is a great word. Past, present, and future. And to help folks to see how they can accomplish some of the things that that you've been advising, let's advance to the slide that Mickey prepared that shows some of the resources that are recommended. And we can let the panelists describe some of their favorites.
You don't have to stay on this one too long. It's a little too self-serving, but these are all actually free resources that we put together at the beginning of the pandemic. Actually, we were getting calls from school districts and teachers from all over the place saying, like, what can we learn really fast to help us be good at this? And so we did a series of webinars with the teachers that teach at our online schools and the special educators and others, and then turn those into resources that would be durable and free. So, you can find those. And if you go on to the next slide, there's a more general set of really important things around standards, as well as opportunities for professional development and engagement. So the whole standards piece on this is something that has also a nice long legacy. I think we first started thinking about standards for online learning almost the minute people were doing online learning. And, what did that mean for being an online teacher, to have an online classroom, to have a fully online school? And so what's collected here are a set of resources coming at this from slightly different angles, but I think with a real commonality about best practices and standards that if you're doing this for the first time in your school or your classroom, or really for yourself as a practitioner, there's some guidance there that you can go to that won't feel strange. I often say that a good teacher is a good teacher, no matter what environment they work in. A great classroom is a great classroom, regardless of whether it's online or face-to-face. And the things that we think are valuable and work really well for kids work really well for kids in both kinds of environments. And I think these links I think have also been pasted in the chat pod, and we'll share out afterwards so that you can actually click on them, which would be useful. Yeah, Allison, you want to put a pitch in for the DLAC conference, by the way?
Sure. Yeah, so the Digital Learning Collaborative is more a membership organization. We're focused more on the research, the policy, and the practice, and sharing out the best practices with the world. And we actually host, this will be the plug for, we host an annual conference. This year it's going to be a hybrid event. So we're trying to model some of the practices that you guys are doing in your classrooms, which it'll be face-to-face June 14th through the 16th in Austin, Texas, but we'll also have an online component as well for those that aren't comfortable traveling or want to participate online as well. So you can click on those links and find out more.
We'll have a couple more links coming. Arizona, ASU Prep and Arizona State University put together a website called ASU for You. And you can just Google ASU for You, and it is a growing compilation of resources and tools, most of which are free, that the university has curated for anybody in the world to use during this time. Some of them are for fee, but as I said, most of them are free, and it's just a growing resource that we continue to add to as more and more resources become available. And then also, my plug, the Arizona Virtual Teacher Institute, we created this year specifically to train teachers and upskill teachers in Arizona to move from a traditional classroom to an online to a remote, and back and forth and everywhere in between, and what each of those terms actually really mean. I call them cousins because there's some similarities between these three environments, but they are not the same. And I think that's one of the challenges that we've had over the last 10 months is we're calling a remote environment where students are pretty much tied to their computer most of the day and are still required to operate on a schedule for certain hours a day and so forth. We're calling that online or virtual learning, which it is not, but that's another webinar. So the Arizona Virtual Teacher Institute, you can find on our website at ASU Prep Digital. And we are also delivering those trainings customized for already created around the world. And so I think there's a ton out there right now where people are trying to contribute to a common cause and truly raise the awareness of the fact that there are tools and there are resources available to be helpful during this time.
I appreciate all of the questions and comments that have come through in the chat and the appreciation for the speakers. I want to give each panelist an opportunity to give any last advice or insight or wisdom that they would like to share with our audience today. And also the attendees, if you have any other comments or questions that you'd like to share.
I'll just end with that you're not alone out there, kind of what everybody was talking about. There are lots of us that have been doing this for a really long time and don't feel like you have to start from scratch, and that there's tons of resources, people and communities out there that are here to help and where you want to support you and help you, and don't feel like you've got to build this all by yourself and start from scratch.
And I would say, remember back in the day when we thought you couldn't have a happy hour with your friends on Zoom? Remember when you thought you couldn't actually work from home and be productive? All these things that are we assumed were true about life.
You got on mute, Mickey. She says, go ahead to Julie, maybe.
Let's see, all these things that we assumed were true about life. I can finish her sentences at this stage. Look where we are today. And there are many of us who haven't seen our families for, certain members of our families for almost a year now, but yet we probably have more communication with them than we did before in many cases. And relationships and work environments have been redesigned. There are many, organizations that are closing their buildings and they're not going back to buildings because they've figured out how to do this in such a way that when we are able to, begin to be together again, that the combination of remote and being together, which we can call hybrid anywhere, is going to happen. But I think, for me, what comes to mind as advice is if you turn on the news, all you hear for the most part is how bad, the learning experience is right now. And I'm sure that for the most part, that's true. And I think the reason that it's happening, though, is because people are giving up and they're thinking that they're going to wait out this virus. And this virus isn't going away. And our president will say daily, we're going to have to learn to live with it. And so we have to approach every day as we're the educators. We're responsible for giving our students the best educational experience we possibly can, regardless of where we sit and regardless of the circumstance. And so that's how we are approaching teaching and learning in a pandemic. And so I would encourage you to kind of, that's a mindset thing that I think you just have to kind of play in your head every day and share with those you work and lead.
We're building resilience together. And Julie, thank you for finishing my sentence. You said exactly what I was going to say. It's an amazing time, and we'll come through it stronger than we ever were before.
The skills that students acquire in this experience, it sounds like you're making the point that they will definitely apply to their life in the future. So even if they're not getting all of the academic standards as they might have, they're getting a lot. All right, I think that we've reached the end of our time. We've got lots of comments in the chat. Again, I appreciate that. And I think Jerry might have some concluding words for us.
Well, I want to thank the presenters today for the panelists, and I'd like to thank Kathy for being a wonderful moderator. I think the information you shared will be very helpful to the mixed audience that we had today. We had educators, we had parents, and we had teachers. And so I think as they think about the different populations that they're working with and how to use this information moving forward will be of great value to them. As I shared earlier in the chat, we will make the resources available on social media, as well as I will send out a follow-up email to those who are registered today and provide them the links as well so that they can access the information. I want to thank you all for giving an hour of your time and to share your experience and knowledge. This is a difficult time, and many are having a challenge pivoting in this new environment. And so any resources and tools and suggestions or just an ear to listen is always appreciated. So I do appreciate Kathy taking the time to really go through all the chat questions and making sure that those were answered. Again, thank you very much. And I wish everyone today, our panelists, our moderator, and our guests, a health and happiness in this new year.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.